People who have a toxic boss think they have two options: quit or suffer through it. But there's a third path that almost nobody considers, and doesn't involve changing your job, tolerating bad behavior, or waiting for your boss to become a totally different person. It requires changing how you position yourself inside the situation. In this video, we're going to talk about 3 different ways you can do this. Build stability, confidence, and professional growth, even when your leadership isn't changing anytime soon. Now, I've mentioned this before. I have a bit of a problem with this word toxic because I don't like labels. I don't like that we just put labels on people and think that excuses our behavior. Right? So this video probably isn't going to be so much about how you can change your boss, because you can't. You can't change other people. All you have is influence. And your influence is going to change depending on your viewpoint and how you see people. If you have your boss labeled as toxic, then nothing they do is going to be right, and you're never, ever going to be wrong. But there is something you can do. There are steps you can take, but kind of requires a bit of a paradigm shift, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, that's, and it might be hard. Some people may click off right now, and I hope
Right.
they don't. Because
I hope not.
it's not about how do I get even? How do I put him in his place? How do I fix her for the way she's treating me? I don't know your boss.
They might be toxic. That might be a fair assessment. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So toxic is a label, but what's the behavior?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the first things to understand is who am I in this process, right? So I am going to be a very different person if I am working with a boss who's stressed, who's fearful, who's going through a lot of hard things at home, or who just isn't real skilled at being a boss yet. If I understand those things, I can deal with each one of those in a different way. But if I'm dealing with a boss who's evil, mean, abusive, cruel, right, I'm going to be a different person. The stories I tell myself creates my emotions. My emotions drive my behavior, right? So first, one of the things, if you don't already know, Rebecca is my daughter, one of 4 children in our family. One of the things that I taught our children diligently, it was very important to me as a father, is that nobody owns your emotions. They're your emotions. Nobody makes you feel anything. Nobody makes you angry. You remember. Why is that? Now, you might think that's baloney if you've been manipulated by others and they're driving your emotions. Understand that your emotions come from the stories you tell yourself about that person. Now, your stories may be accurate and your emotions may be valid. I'm not saying they're not. What I am saying is, why did I teach this to my children? Because I love my children so very much that I cannot stand the thought of them going through life being victims. And if someone else is driving your emotions, you are giving them license to drive your life. And so you become their victim. So now back to this idea of, is your boss toxic? I don't know, define the word, right? Toxic can mean a number of different things, but first off, identify the behavior. What's really happening? Are you being given more intense management that you need to the point where you feel mistrusted? Are you being told to do jobs you're not able to do and not given the support you need? Are you being abandoned at work? Are you trying to do as you do your job, and inevitably we all make mistakes, and if you make a mistake or don't live up to an expectation, does your boss get loud, throw things, cuss, demean you in some way? All of those are inappropriate behaviors and very ineffective. I can tell you that I've done this kind of work for decades now. I can remember 2 people in all this time that I thought were literally, okay, I don't know if literally toxic, like I didn't get poisoned by being close to them, so I can't say literally toxic, but literally unkind, abusive human beings for whatever reason. Whatever got them to that state, I don't know. And I've worked with hundreds of people, and I can only think of 2. I'll only mention one. One person I met with early in my career was very upset because his employees were not working hard enough and they were sloughing off on the job, and his profit margins were going down, and I think they might have even been pilfering. So he met with me and a client and a colleague of mine to talk about how to improve his culture. It's what we do. We help people improve their culture. as leaders. So as the more we listened, what he really wanted to learn was, how can I control my employees and how can I punish them for doing bad stuff? And at some point, I kept trying to redirect the conversation to, how do you as a leader support people? How do you as a leader create a healthy regenerative culture? And he kept coming back to, how do I monitor? He got to the point where he was putting up cameras all over so he could sit in his office and watch people work and then run out there and catch them not working so that he could punish them for not working. That's where he had gotten to. And at some point I said, okay, what I can help you with is I can help you lead people in a way where they want to work, help people to be engaged, help people to enjoy their work. He said, I don't care if they enjoy their work. They're mules. I want them to work. They're here to work. They're nothing but mules. And I said, you know what? I don't think I'm able to help you. The kind of work you're asking for isn't the kind of work that I do. So you might find someone that helps you create performance improvement programs. You might find someone to help you create meetings that increase accountability. I'm not that person, because what you want to accomplish, I don't want to help you do, right? That journey that you're on, I do not want to be a part of. 2 times in my career, I told a client that 2, maybe 3, I told a client, can't help you, right? Because their goals were not healthy goals. They didn't desire to be good leaders. They desired to use people and get the most out of them and not treat them like human beings. They saw people as a means to an end, or a cog in their machine of business. We accuse a lot of leaders of that mindset. Dirty, rotten CEOs, imperialist pigs, capitalists, whatever and I have met with many CEOs over the years. And I will tell you that almost all of them, when you sit down and talk about what's most important to them, I can't tell you how many CEOs, when I say, what's most important to you? Why is that important? Why is that important? Why is that important? When you get down to the core of what matters most to them, I can't tell you how many hard case, tough CEOs I've seen with tears in their eyes and said, my biggest fear is I mess up and 300 families are harmed. 300 people go home without a paycheck. 300 lives are hurt because I, as a leader, did something that damaged this business. So I can tell you that most people have good intent, even if they appear to be toxic. Because I can tell you that some of those leaders had behaviors that were very counterproductive to good leadership. That's different, right? So the first thing is, man, I can't more highly recommend a book called Master My Stories, or a book called Crucial Conversations. That's the book, by a group called Vital Smarts. And one of the topics in there is Master My Stories. Not going to go through that in detail, but I would say that applies to this conversation that we're having. So probably this is a longer introduction than we normally do. The reason is we kind of had to take a little bit of time. Are you willing to make that paradigm shift? Are you willing to see your boss differently so that you can be a different person? Because the you in the past and your boss of the past were 2 people who could not communicate and who told stories about each other and put each other in categories where the problems became almost insurmountable. The you of the future, with this shift of mindset, might be able to have conversations that the you of the past could not have. And I think that's the first goal, is become that you, that person who's able to have that conversation that will make a difference. Now, one quick disclaimer, and then we can jump into these 3 skills or aspects. Quick disclaimer is, what I'm not saying is that if you have the right conversation, you will fix your boss and everything will be good. I've seen it happen. It's certainly possible, but there are no guarantees. So the question is, are you willing to do what it takes to try to help your culture and your relationship be better or not?
All right. So long introduction, but hopefully we didn't lose anybody there. And hopefully this is what people want, rather than just validation or getting somebody fired. What is the first step you would take? The
first step is really prepare for the conversation, right? Identify the gap between what you expect and what you see happening. What is your boss doing that you're interpreting as being a toxic behavior or becoming a toxic person to you and the work you do? And what would you like to see her do instead? So to start off with, I would want to know, what are my values and how are they being violated in this situation? I value people being treated respectfully, and I'm being treated with disrespect. I value building people up and helping them grow, and I feel like I'm being controlled and managed. I value giving credit where credit's due, and I feel like my boss is taking credit for my work. By the way, I've had that happen. I've had to have that conversation. I had a boss take an article of mine, put his name on it, and put it in a magazine. So we had to have a conversation when that happened. So, we got through it. We got past it. So what are your values? What are your boss's values? What does she really want to accomplish here? What's her mission? What are her objectives? And then kind of back to what we started to say, what's the gap then between what you're hoping to see and what you would expect and what you're actually seeing? And then take the time to understand. Now, the next question is going to be, when I start to see those behaviors and not as character traits or personalities, and I look at my boss's behaviors and I see my own behaviors, am I participating in a downward spiral? I can tell you that I had one time years ago when I had to sit and visit with my boss where I felt like I was being controlled, where I felt the boss was taking credit for the work I was doing. And I was worried. I was at a stage in my career, a much earlier stage, where it was important to me to grow and develop and move up in my career. And I felt I was being held back. So I did some of this homework to try to figure out, how do I prepare myself to have a conversation? And so I did get a chance to sit down with the boss and say, okay, here's my concern. I feel like there's a lot of stress in our working relationship. So I want to start with, how are you seeing me? I want you to understand the importance of this step, right? Instead of saying, I think you're a jerk and you're toxic. Okay, now imagine you start your conversation, I think you're a jerk and you're toxic. Yeah. That's not going to go well. It's just not going to go well unless your boss has incredible presence of mind. And if he did, you wouldn't be having this conversation in the first place. So the odds are not in your favor if you start out with your label. So start out with, I wonder how you're seeing me, and give it a good shot. I even was able to ask, I wonder if you're worried that I'm not a team player or that I'm not aligned with your vision or your mission for where you want this company to go. And my boss was able to say, yeah, I was so excited when we hired you because you're talented. And I just really felt like you were a perfect fit. But I got to tell you, the last couple weeks, I've been a little bit concerned. Now, why was he concerned? He was concerned because I was appearing to him to be more worried about myself than I was about the mission of the company. I was appearing to him to be more egocentric than being a team player. Why did I look that way to him? That was what my response looked like when I felt like I was being held back, when I felt like I was being squelched in my career path, when I felt like someone was trying to take credit for the work I was doing. I started to try to promote myself to overcome that barrier that I was perceiving. So his perception of me was very understandable. I didn't agree with it, but I could definitely understand it. And so once I listened, I was able to say, okay, so here's what you're seeing. And he said, yeah, John, I got to tell you, I've been a little concerned. And I was able to say, I get where you're coming from. I can understand why you would feel that way. I don't agree. I think there's more happening than you're seeing, but I get it. And I was saying, then I was able to say, I'm seeing you in certain ways that are not positive either. And they're probably just as unfair as how you're seeing me. And then I was able to say, here's what I see you doing. And he said, gosh, yeah, I could see where you would think, and I'm sorry that's coming across that way. And here's what I've been afraid of, or here's what, so in the areas where he was worried I wasn't quite up to speed, we were able to come up with a plan of me getting up to speed and not him just jumping in and controlling the outcome, but helping me become more competent in those areas. There were areas that I had competencies he didn't even know about yet, where he was able to relax a little bit and say, okay, I got you there. So that, prepare yourself to have that conversation. Understand there's this fundamental unfairness of human interaction. I don't know why it's like this. It just is. I judge others by their behaviors, but I judge myself by my intentions. Stop and think about that for just a second. That's always happening. So your boss has certain intentions and is behaving based on that intent. You're seeing the behavior and you're assuming the intent. You have certain intentions and you act, like in my story, I was acting based on my intent. The boss saw my behavior and interpreted a very different intent than what I had. So start with that. Be prepared to understand that you're judging, one, you're seeing a behavior and you've given it the label of toxic. Back up a half step or a full step and look at the behavior. Now back up another step and be curious about the motive. Why is Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do that? Now, you might say, look, John, you don't get it. I've already told you my boss is unreasonable, irrational, and not a decent person. Okay, challenge your theories for just a little while. Just a little while. Suspend that. Put it on a shelf. Get it out of your face and ask the question really honestly. Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do that? You might find that there's an answer. It doesn't excuse the behavior. It does help you be prepared to deal with the relationship.
All right. So backing up from perceived intentions to behaviors and then asking about the intentions and the motives. All right. And what about the second point?
The second, I delved into it a bit already as I was explaining the first, and it's how do you have that conversation? And this is where we really come to understanding, right? So that seek first to understand. So first, ask for feedback about your own role. And then it's an interesting thing. When your boss feels understood by you, it creates, in almost all cases, now again, I'm not making a promise, there's no guarantee, but human interaction being what it is, I've seen this play out positively almost every time. So the odds are in your favor. When you've listened, when your boss feels understood, you create almost a social contract, a social commitment from the boss to hear you. So ask. Based on what we just talked about, I'd like to share a perspective. And in my case, I was able to say, and I understand it may be just as unfair or just as incorrect as what yours was of me. But here's what I'm seeing. And here are the stories I'm telling myself. Here are the conclusions I'm starting to draw. Right? So when you do these things, it's coming across as overly controlling. It's coming across as, and if you feel like it's coming across as abusive, okay, make it safe to say that. It's coming across as almost abusive. Be careful of the label, because what you don't want to do is drive your boss back into self-defense mode, right? This is not a threat. I'm not threatening to sue you right now. I'm not, I just want to have a conversation. We are two human beings working together to accomplish a mission. You happen to have authority. I happen to have skill and knowledge to do my job. We need each other. So that's pretty much the how to have a conversation, kind of in a nutshell. But if you understand the principles, you can apply them to your situation. My situation was different. It was unique to me. But the principles will apply.
Okay. So I think we've said this one a lot. Seek first to understand. And when you do, you kind of create a bridge. You improve your relationship almost immediately to the point where the odds are a lot better that you will then be better understood as well. Okay.
Find that works well if you happen to be the leader as well. Help people feel understood, not in a manipulative way, but in a genuine way. Seek to understand people.
Cannot fake the caring part. And without it, all the skills in the world are not going to do a heap of beans of good. Not for long anyway. So you prepare for the conversation. You don't walk in hot. You don't walk in off your cuff. You have the conversation, and hopefully this is going well. You've achieved some understanding. You've gained some perspective and clarity you didn't have before for both of you. And then what next?
Backing up just a little bit to another part of preparing for the meeting that, Rebecca, you mentioned that helped me remember this, and that is, how long should it take you to prepare for this conversation? Understand there's a line between preparation and avoidance. A rule of thumb for me is if it takes more than a couple weeks, you're avoiding. You're not preparing. A lot of people say, well, I'm waiting for the right time. You already have a strained working relationship. The right time's not going to come. You have to create the opportunity.
Right time was probably a year ago or...
Yeah. It's kind of like the old proverb about planting a tree, right? The right time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is right now. So now, what I'm not saying is jump into this conversation. What I am saying is take a little time to prepare. But if it takes more than a week or two to prepare yourself and find the time to meet, you are avoiding. So know that difference. Just know that in and of yourself, that you're preparing to move forward. You're not waiting for the right time and then end up avoiding. As you avoid, it will get worse, and it will get worse, and it will get worse. One client had a great saying, bad news always sells best fresh. If you let it sit too long, it's like having fish out on the counter. It's going to stink. So don't let your tough conversation become tougher because you put it off. All right. So now to answer your question on what is that third step? The third step is, how do you move forward? Determine the commitments that you're going to make. What will you do different? This is a good time for SMART goals, right? So the overall goal is, how do we improve our working relationship? And what are those things that we'll do differently in the future that will help this to be that will help us to be more effective. Also, create a follow-up strategy. You're going to blow it because chances are both you and your boss are going to be changing some habits. It takes time to change a habit. So make it okay to give each other feedback along the way. As you do that you're creating a follow-up strategy. How am I going to measure success? How will we hold each other accountable for making these changes that we say we want to make? Right? And it can sound like, if I'm the boss, I can say, you know what? I know that that I've responded out of fear or emotion when these 2 or 3 things have happened. I don't want to do that. When I do that, call me on it, would you please? Maybe don't do it in the middle of a meeting, but let me know. And then it can sound like, hey boss, remember when you asked me to, you just did it. Okay, thanks. Right? I'm doing what you asked me to do. Or when my boss says, hey, John, remember when you asked me to point out, it looks like you're more worried about your ego or your career right now than you are our shared mission. I want you to trust me on the career. You got to help us accomplish the mission, right? So those are when I hear someone give me feedback that I have asked for, it's a lot different than someone jumping in and saying, hey, you're a jerk, right? Or you're being mean or whatever. So clarify your commitments, maybe even write them down for each other, and then create a follow-up strategy on how you're going to move the ball forward. Because odds are progress is going to come in the form of changing habits.
And remember that you need to give yourself and the other person a little bit of grace, right? You mentioned that. You're going to be changing habits. It's not going to be easy. And unfortunately, it's going to be very easy to just fall back into those old habits and that old way. Oh, I had a conversation with him and he promised me all these things and he didn't follow through. See, I was right. He's a jerk. Right? It's going to be very, very tempting. And again, not saying that they might not succeed. Right? The boss might find it harder to change those habits. They might get busy. You might still not come out on top. And so, or in what is a fair position.
We did a video. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I apologize.
Go ahead, talk.
We did a video a while back on dealing with underperforming teammates, right, as their leader. There's a principle there that's going to apply here because it's about your goal, your intent, and accomplishing the mission. If you're working with an employee, so I'm going to give this perspective, and then we're going to flip it and see how it applies the other way. If you're working with an employee who has been doing a poor job and needs to improve their performance, and you're going through an improvement plan, the first thing you need to know is, are you doing it as a leader or are you doing it as a manager? It's not bad to be a manager. If you're doing it as a manager, you're doing it in a way that will mitigate liability in the future, right? I want to do it in a way that I don't get sued or that I don't lose a lawsuit if I have to let this person go. Right? If this relationship ends up not working out and there's a termination, I might do that in a way by the way, you need to be a good manager first and then a good leader. So that's the bare minimum. Be a good manager. If you're doing that as a good leader, your intent is very different. Your process might look very much the same, but your intent is very different. Because your intent is, we're going through this process. My absolute goal is to help this person succeed in being part of this company's mission and have a good career here. That's my goal. I'm going to help this person be successful as their leader and help them remove obstacles or provide the coaching needed, whatever, right? So think about that. And now we just flip the script. The principle applies even if I'm the employee and I'm talking to my boss. What do I really want here? If I think I'm going to quit here and I want to just say I tried everything and I can prove I'm right, okay, do that. Be a halfway decent human being. Make sure you don't blow it and have these conversations in a way that, okay, I know we had the conversation and my boss didn't change, so now I know I can leave, right? That's possible. That would be a little bit sad. And this is where the grace comes in. What do you really want? We've had the conversation. We've identified it. Now I'm going to help support my boss in changing her habits as I'm asking her to help support me in changing mine. Now, if this happens and there's 3 or 4 times and it's back to the same thing, back to the same thing, back to the same thing, okay, now I know it probably is time for me to leave. This may not be the place for me to work. So all of this in a nutshell, you can, as you said in the introduction, we feel like our 2 options are, I can just quit right now, or I can suffer with this abuse and be a miserable human being, right? And it's kind of like fight or flight, right? When I feel like I'm under threat, my brain shuts down and I go into fight or flight. That's exactly what's happening. I feel like I'm under threat. I'm not thinking at a higher level. I'm thinking in terms of fight or flight. I can just leave, or I can stay here and suffer, or maybe I can even make my boss miserable. That'll give me some sort of satisfaction. I don't know right? But don't go into fight or flight. There is another option. So when we say there's another option, the other option is dialogue. The other option is problem solving. The other option is, and by the way, when you do this, it will bless your career. When you know how to have these tough conversations and you grow your career, you're going to have tough conversations like this with employees. You're going to have tough conversations like this with customers. You're going to have tough conversations like this with regulators, right? Any stakeholder that you have in your business or in your career can let you down. Knowing how to be a problem solver, knowing how to build relationships and create trust will help you know how to build culture. That will bless your career. You rise above the problem by being able to see it in a more holistic way, in a way that's much more humanizing. If you find that you're dehumanizing someone by calling them something like toxic, this is your sign. And it's your opportunity to look at it a little differently. And again, I do want to caution, I don't want to be thoughtless or insensitive. If someone truly is in a situation where there is abuse, deal with it as abuse. Understand that, just challenge yourself just enough to identify, yes, this is not one of those situations where I can follow John and Rebecca's advice and have a conversation. I really do need to get out of Dodge, right? Or I need to take legal action, or I need to, right? I don't want anybody ever to be put in harm's way or to be abused by someone who has authority as they see it. So know that difference. And really challenge yourself to be able to grow yourself and your career by having these types of conversations.
All right. Well, I think we just kind of worked in number 4, which wasn't a skill. It was a what if it doesn't work. And there you have it. Sometimes Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, one of them is understanding win-win or no deal. You don't have to sit and suffer. You can try your best to make it win-win, which is what we just talked about. And sometimes for your own integrity, your own well-being and growth, it is okay to say no deal. Practically, that might look a little bit different. You can't just walk away from a job, but hopefully you've done some preparation and are able to move to a better place for you.
Exactly right. So in the terms of what if it doesn't work, know the difference between influence and control. You can influence this situation, and by the way, you already are, but you cannot control it. You can't control another person's choices, but you are already influencing them. How can you influence them for good? Give them options. Understand the risk of action versus opportunity and the cost of inaction, right? So understand that, yes, when I have this conversation, there will be some risk. It's not risk-free. I don't care how good you are at it, you won't eliminate all possible risk. You have to balance that out with what's the opportunity cost when I don't have this conversation? What's the cost to me and my career? What's the cost to this company where I serve? And then for me personally, I'm going to go all the way back to that very first point. What are my core values and what does it mean for me to act with integrity?
Right. Well, I hope this was helpful and we didn't throw anybody off with our redefining of toxic. But thanks so much for sharing.
Welcome. I hope this is helpful for folks. It's a tough spot to be in, and many of us have been there. Thank you.